So this is Life Offsite, Effective Habits for Remote Working. So some elements that we need to consider are establishing that remote mindset. We will look at the common challenges and how we might design to handle those challenges. We will look at embedding some simple practices that should help with remote sessions, and then look at team bonding in a remote world. We're then going to go a little bit deeper into one of the subjects that will come up throughout. So in terms of getting into the right mindset, there are changes that you want to make for yourself, and there are changes that you'll want to make for your team. So for yourself, first and foremost, consider your environment, master your environment. So try and set aside somewhere that you can have as a workspace, and try and treat it like you would any desk in an office. So can you make it as comfortable as it can be for you to work there all the time? Do you have a chair? Or I've got sort of chair, keyboard, a stand for my laptop so that I'm not bending over that all day. And ideally establish a boundary between what is work and what is home life. So can you have a separate space where you do work from during the day? And beyond that, make sure to take breaks from that space throughout the day so that you're not constantly at your screen, constantly working. If we were all in an office just working as normal, we'd be taking lots of little breaks to go and get a drink or to chat to someone in the office. So try and take those breaks and just give yourself some time away from your screen and some time to reset. And then changes you need to make with how you deal with other people. So try to listen first, seek to understand before trying to be understood, give people a chance to express themselves and to actually finish their idea before you dive in, before you try and correct them or put across your opinion instead. And assume good intent. We're losing a lot of communication that we have with each other throughout the day, little conversations. If you're all communicating via chat, then you're potentially losing out on body language, tone of voice, all these little things that add layers to our communication throughout the day. We're losing all of that, so it can be really easy to jump to conclusions. So try and be generous, try and take the best interpretation of somebody's actions, of somebody's words, and don't let the circumstances mean you jump to the wrong conclusion. In terms of changes for your team, you might want to set up a team charter. This is a way of agreeing how you want to work together as a team. And I'm not going to go into that too much here because that's what we're going to dive into deeper after the first half of the session. You might, as a team, want to agree golden hours. So are there times throughout the day that you want to agree that nobody will book in any meetings so that people actually have a defined period of the day where they can get their head down and get some work done. Another thing to consider is that at the minute, many people have kids at home, have families at home, and people might need to be more flexible with their hours. So do you need to agree ways that people are going to be more flexible? Do you have essential meetings that people need to dial into, or can they be a bit more flexible? Get the playbook going, actually look at your Agile processes if you already have them established. Take a look at what already works for you and try and make it work in this remote sense as it normally would. Most things can be adapted, but having things agreed and predefined will really help people be on the same page. We all need to default to being more open. So what would feel like over communicating if you were in an office is more necessary now. So little chats with people throughout the day, being more clear with updates, giving more frequent updates, more extensive updates about things you're working on so that everyone actually understands, and so that if you're collaborating with people, they've actually got all the information that they need. In an office, that might feel like over communicating because they could just come and grab you for a quick chat if they needed to. But right now, that's a lot harder. So assume that you're going to need to communicate to a level that might normally be over communicating, and be transparent. And finally, accept that it's okay to fail. Accept that this is a new challenge for many teams. and that it has its own unique set of challenges. Things will go wrong, things can go wrong, and it's okay that they do, as long as you learn from them and improve next time. So next we're going to look at the 3 difficult Ds. These are the common challenges for remote working, and they are distraction, disconnection, and discomfort. But we can design ways to manage them up front, and they can help improve the way that remote teams work together dramatically. When it comes to distraction, what we mean is things like we live in a world with millions of notifications. Someone's always trying to get your attention, whether that be a company sending you their latest offer, or somebody texting you, or emails coming through. And with us all being remote, you're getting even more of these right now. So can you mute any notifications while you're trying to concentrate, particularly sounds, because that will grab your attention, but can you make it so that maybe your screen doesn't light up with notifications or something like that? Next, noise can be a real issue. So if you're dialing into a session, have you made sure that there's not, loads of noise going on in the background? Now, if you've got kids at home, if you've got stuff going on, that can be hard. And I guess if somebody else in your session has some noise going on, try and be understanding. But if you can, try and find a quiet space so that the conversation becomes easier. And just to come back to that point from the previous slide about over-communicating, I think it's important to find that line between what is communicating to a sufficient level in this new normal that we're living in versus actually just being noisy. Because if everyone's receiving millions of messages every day, they're just going to start ignoring them because they can't read them all. So actually, not only noise in the audio sense, but noise is in too much information. Be aware of both of those. Anticipate boredom. Avoid making people check in for the sake of checking in. Try and keep your meetings tight, and if they need to be longer sessions, planning breaks. Tell people at the start of a session if you're going to take a break, so that they know how long they need to concentrate for. They know they're going to get 5 minutes after half an hour or whatever it is. That can really help with keeping people's attention for longer sessions. And in terms of tools, make sure that you're keeping your tool set simple. Try and use as few tools as you can and make them as easy and simple to join as possible so that everyone can be present. Disconnection can be both literal and metaphorical. So literal disconnection, things like having an internet connection drop out, your headphones or headset becoming disconnected or dying, your battery on your laptop going. They're all hard stops to any session that you're on. So try and avoid them if you can. Try and plan for, as much as you can. But obviously, if your internet goes down, that's probably not your fault. More metaphorically, disconnection comes from, as I mentioned before, the lack of body language in our communication, lack of little water cooler conversations that we'd have throughout the day. So your sessions might be less effective than you're used to because you're used to having really easy chats in person. And that will come on to how you would design for handling that. Discomfort. Many of us are extroverted, like to be around other people. So being at home on your own right now can be really tough. Try and reach out to those people and make sure that there are social things for them to join so that they're not feeling too lonely. For remote sessions, anticipate camera shyness. People don't really like being on webcams because you have that feeling of being watched, but be aware of that and try and plan for it. Try and encourage people so that having webcams on can really improve the visual connections formed during a session like this. So having them on is ideal, but have those conversations with people first. Watch the time, make sure that sessions aren't too long, people aren't getting uncomfortable, people maybe need to go to the bathroom or go and get a drink, planning breaks so that they can do that. And minding our manners, having good etiquette, not talking over each other, trying to let people finish and assuming that good intent, all those points I made earlier about having respect for each other. So here are our tips for facilitating a remote session. Good habits seem obvious, but making them happen consistently can have a really big impact. So first, be clear on the purpose of your session and make sure that everybody who's going to attend knows the purpose of your session. And make sure that you have everyone you need for that session to actually be productive, and none of the wrong people. So if somebody doesn't need to be there, then don't invite them because it's just another person to manage. But if you haven't got the right set of people, rearrange and do it when you can get that set of people. But make sure that there's an agenda sent out and everyone comes understanding what the session is for. When we meet in person, we would have time to make connections at the start of the session. So have little chats, get to know each other in the room. So can you measure the temperature in the room? Does everybody know each other already? If you're a team, they probably will. Or are they a new team? Are they still getting to know each other? Do you need to spend time building that rapport? Do you need a disclosure game or an icebreaker? Something to just help people get to know each other a bit more. Structure, consider the structure of your session, and if you're wanting input from everybody in a group, consider looking at something from liberating structures. So maybe 1, 2, 4 all, which is the structure we've mentioned there. 1, 2, 4 all, a problem is posed, then everyone is given a minute to think about it on their own. Then people are randomly paired up and encouraged to discuss it in their pairs for a short time. Then those pairs are combined to fours and they discuss the problem further. Then at the end, everyone comes back together. And as everyone comes back together, they can discuss any findings or things that were surprising or anything they thought was really important that came up in conversation. And this is a good way of combating groupthink, which we'll come on to in a minute. But it's a way of ensuring that everybody's voices are heard. But consider the structure of your session and make sure that you've planned for the type of session you want to have. Consider the size of your session. Ideally, no more than 12 people in a conversation. And decide that carefully, as we said before. Make sure that you're not just inviting everyone for the sake of it. Location, right now this is a bit enforced, but a principle to take back when you do go to working in offices again. So if one person's dialing in remotely, then everybody should be. This is about giving everybody a common denominator, a common way of communicating so that nobody feels left out. Everyone's got the same methods of communicating and the same ability to communicate. Setup, so some of this stuff we covered already, but are you in a quiet space? Are your headphones, mic working? How's your internet connection? Have you got battery? Tools, does everyone have access to the tool that you need? If not, maybe make sure that you've given time at the start so that people can download whatever tool it is. And if it has any key features, so Zoom has some extra features that a facilitator might choose to use. Does anyone that needs to know about those features actually know how to use them? Clarity, be clear and concise with the language you use. Consider cultural differences or language abilities and make sure that you check that everyone is included and understands what's being said. Finally, follow up. So when we leave a meeting in person, we're often in little groups of 2 or 3, having conversations about what comes next or about shared understanding. When you dial off a session, you have a hard stop. So do you as facilitator or whoever was making the decisions and actually leading the session, do you have any actions? Have they been communicated? Do you need to follow up? If there's a recording, has that been shared? Make sure that everyone's not feeling left out afterwards. So I mentioned groupthink briefly before. This is the phenomenon where the first or the loudest voice in a group sways the thinking of the rest of the group. So often if somebody's already given an answer, everyone will just agree with that. It's human nature, we like to. Or if there's a dominant voice in the group, people will tend to just wait for them to speak and allow them to speak. This can be particularly difficult in a remote setting because the first person to speak immediately is covering the interactions with everyone else, and potentially a loud voice will speak over people and ensure that others aren't being heard. So how can we plan for that? Well, first, ensure that you've got an agreed facilitator, someone that's going to manage the session, keep things moving, if there is a loud voice, making sure that they don't overpower everyone else. Ensuring that everybody who joins the session speaks early is really important. So if you want input from people, ensure that they're speaking early so that they feel comfortable in that setting. They've already spoken, so actually speaking up again is a more natural thing. Ask open questions and encourage productive discussion. Practice active listening. Acknowledge what people are saying and play it back to them in your own words so that you are building that shared understanding. Invite difference. You might want to have a session where you're gathering ideas. If you're doing that, split out divergent, which is the gathering of ideas, and convergent, which is the agreeing on one or several ideas. Split those into phases of discussion so that everyone knows which part they're currently in. And avoid over-dominance. If there is an acknowledged leader or boss in the group, ensure that they speak last so that they aren't colouring everybody else's interactions. I've mentioned it a couple of times throughout, but we are losing a lot of personal connections right now. So how can we go about team bonding in this world? The key thing is to remember it's not all about work all the time, and it's okay to have a bit of fun. So on the right here is a picture from the Wall Street Journal of a bunch of people having dialed into a session in fancy dress. If you're planning for your team, how can you introduce the non-work side of being in a team? So can you add a text chat channel which is just for banter and for chat, where work chat is completely banned? Can you encourage people to give personal updates about their life? Not oversharing, but little stuff like what are you having for breakfast or lunch, or what are your plans for this evening? Can you arrange fun group activities? So whether that's a pub quiz or everyone just getting tea at the same time and dialing in for a non-work chat, or potentially looking at some game or competition that you can create. That little bit of competition can really help a team bond. So can you find an online game or a mobile app where everyone gets scores? I know an old team of mine, we all used to play the mobile game Temple Run, and we'd share scores and get really competitive with each other, and that really helped us bond as a team. So I think I'd really encourage you to just take some time and think about how your team is bonding when they're not all in the same room and you're losing that normal pattern of communication. So the second half, we're going to dive deeper on team charters. So these are a way of a team agreeing how they want to work together. So we're all adapting to a new normal, but we probably need to agree what that looks like for us as a team. A team charter can help you determine what is important to you as a team whilst all working in your own location. It's a collaborative, dynamic document that clarifies how you want to work together to achieve your objectives and set ground rules for ways of working. So it can be used to decide what's important to a team, promote a shared understanding of the values that team holds, set expectations of each other as individuals and expectations of the team, and define what success looks like for that team. So how would we go about creating a team charter? Some vital points that we need to consider are: what's the mission of the team? What's our goal? What are our team's values? What are values we hold dear and want to be known for? What shared behaviours are important to us? What do we expect of each other? And how do we want to interact? And defining what good likes for us as a group, as a team. So several questions to ask your team. So ask, how do we want to collaborate? What work do we have to do at the same time? And how are we going to do that in a collaborative way? My team, we spend a lot of time working with Google Docs, and we'll often dial onto a call, all looking at the same shared Google Doc and talk through it as a team. How can we help stay focused on that session? Do we want to keep sessions short or ensure that we have breaks? And does everyone know what each other's working on? How can you ensure that clarity is there and that communication has been had? Team culture, what do you want to be known for? How would we describe the team culture? How do we want to celebrate our success or share our learnings? Socialising, as mentioned before, this is really important. How might we take time for connections outside of meetings and standard working hours? How often do we want to check in with each other? And structure, what do we need to do to be flexible around circumstances and time constraints? And what can be accomplished if we don't work at the same time? We also need to look at setting some boundaries. Our remote sessions need some ground rules, including when we're creating a team charter. So make sure that all team members are in a quiet area, free from distraction. Introduce everyone, give everybody a chance to contribute. Don't stare at your phone while somebody else is presenting or talking. Don't interrupt other people on the call when they're speaking. Test your tech, your Wi-Fi, headphones, etc. Read the agenda and come prepared. Don't check emails or work on other tasks while you're in that meeting. Turn off notifications and act the same in a remote meeting as you would in a face-to-face one. So setting up your team charter. This is a 6-step thing that should take an hour, maybe an hour and a quarter. It requires all the members of your team and some sort of online whiteboard or online document that everybody can contribute to, and a video conferencing tool, whether that be Zoom or Hangouts or whatever works for you. So step 1, take 5 minutes and set the scene. Explain what a team charter is, why they're important, and share the structure for the rest of the session. Step 2, take 5 to 10 minutes and as individuals reflect on the best team you've ever been a part of. What were the ingredients that made that team so great? Think in terms of the 4 bases of collaboration, structure, culture, and socialising. Step 3, still as individuals, while the team are working remotely, consider what is more important to you now and what else do you need to think about or do differently. What habits do you need to support you in your remote working? Step 4, break into pairs or smaller groups to discuss the ideas, using features like Zoom's breakout rooms or Jam common rooms, or just separate phone calls, Slack calls, whatever works, so that people can have that conversation and manage that, so ensure that people are coming back at the end of the time box. Then, as a wider group, come together for 30 minutes as a big group, discuss what each smaller group has come up with, and in addition, think about what do you as a team want to achieve, how will you know that you're succeeding, what values do you want to display, which behaviours do you want to encourage, and which behaviours do you want to avoid, how will you ensure you live by those values and principles, and how will you call out when you see that these things aren't being lived up to, and how can you do that safely and respectfully. Finally, step 6, capture the outcomes from the session using your online whiteboard or document. Make sure everyone knows where it can be found, and don't forget to decide how often you'd like to review it to check it's still valid and represents the team. Visualising a team charter. So this slide right here was created by a team in one of our clubs. So on the right, you've got what they defined as the qualities of good remote working. So things like having dedicated space in your house, responding quickly to priority work, establishing a routine, being able to work at your own pace, keep an eye on any morale changes in the team. Then on the right, qualities of being part of a great team. So things like focusing on the customer, being honest and open, communicating clearly and frequently, and striving for quality over quantity. Obviously, there are many more there. Don't want to spend 5 minutes running through it all, but this is a really nice visualization of what was important to that team and what qualities they want to live up to while they are remote working, but also what qualities are just true to them as being part of a great team, and having it visualized in a way that everyone can read it quickly and it's easy to access is really crucial. And then we want to make sure that we're keeping momentum. So afterwards, you've created your team charter. Now what? Well, ensure that everybody has access to it. Everybody knows where it is. If you have a shared communication channel like Slack, can you pin it somewhere so that people can get to it without even thinking? Commit to doing your best to live by the agreements made. When doing this with a team gathered in person, one way to do this is to get everybody to actually sign the team charter. Something about that act of putting your name against it that makes people actually live up to it a bit more. Hold each other to the agreed standards and ensure that you are calling out safely and respectfully when people aren't. Sometimes there are good reasons that they're not, and these need to be discussed rather than just something that somebody needs to be told off for. Review the team charter regularly in Scrum retrospectives or other sessions, and iterate on it to make it a living document and something that actually stays useful to you all. And if you add any new members to the team, show them the team charter, but actually talk through it with them and ensure that they understand it, let them ask any questions they might have. And potentially, if you do have a new team member, make a point of reviewing the team charter probably within their first few weeks in the team, just so that they've got a chance to contribute. And if they've got any issues with any of it, they can speak up. Here are some useful resources for a team charter session. So tools you might use are on the left. So Miro or Mural, Ideas Board, Stormboard, Concept Board, Jamboard. These are all virtual whiteboards that you can use for putting up post-it notes or writing down ideas. So for that idea gathering and then agreement stage of the session, these can all be really useful. And on the right are links to some more reading on team charters. We will obviously send out this deck after the session so that you can go and have a read of those. Okay, that's all from me. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and over to you all for any questions.
Josh, can I ask, obviously we're all using all these different platforms right now, and you've mentioned a few there. Are there any that you personally from your team's experience recommend, especially ones for the more informal things, the social things, the group chats?
So for team charter, just on that one, because it's what we were just on, I used Ideas Board when running that with the team last week. For social stuff, Zoom's been great. I know that there are a couple of acknowledged issues with it at the minute, but it seems to be a fairly common tool for most people, and it's really good because you can, mute people if they're not meant to be speaking, and you can put it in gallery view so that you can see everybody who's in the call and actually see how everyone is currently interacting with each other, see whether people are paying attention, try and read the body language like you would in a room. We as a team use Slack a lot. We chat throughout the day, and Hangouts would be the other one. So we do a lot of our smaller meetings on Hangouts just because it's nice and quick. We use Google for most documents and emails and stuff like that. So Hangouts is our default for a quick session.
There's been a question on the board.
Yep, similar question on the chat. So any tools that are free, which are useful to manage projects, communications and so on. I know that Slack has a free tier, so in terms of communications that would work. I think Google Docs is free to a certain level as well. So for any sort of planning tools that you might need there. But I guess Upwave, in terms of having like an Agile Kanban board or sort of a project board, if you like. Someone in the chat said Trello. I'm not sure if Trello is still free. I think it is. But yeah, Trello and Upwave are very similar. Yeah, I think that's what comes to mind. Any other questions, anyone?
Have you received any experience so far over the last couple of weeks of any clients, sort of, or experiences of companies pushing back on their staff using these applications? So obviously this is almost unsecured applications that they're adding to the company's computer and hard drives. Is there any pushback on that, do you think?
I've not seen much. I think I know a few people in a few companies who have had a bit of a wobble in the last week about Zoom with the security issues that have been talked about. My understanding is that they're trying to handle those pretty quickly. But I think that's a company level decision, particularly with something like Zoom. But I think the key thing is just to be mindful of what you're putting where. So do you know what security levels you can expect from a tool? So it's something like a shared whiteboard. If anyone's got the link, they can probably get to it. So if there's anything super secretive or sort of company essential, maybe don't just throw it on somewhere that you don't know the security levels of. But yeah, I've not seen much pushback myself. Kelly's also on the call. Kelly's a member of my team. I don't know if she's got anything. There's a shake of the head there, so I'll carry on. One more question from the chat. How do you keep people engaged, especially if numbers are 20-ish? I'd come back to timing for the most part. Timing and purpose. Does everyone know why they're there? And can you keep it as short as possible so that they can actually pay attention? If someone doesn't need to be there, don't force them, because one person looking disengaged can distract others and stop them from engaging quite as well. But if it's a bigger group, you're going to probably need a longer session. So plan in more breaks and tell them up front that you're going to do that, and tell them when it will be at the start of the session so that they know the expectations of them. And breaking in big groups into smaller groups. So we mentioned 1, 2, 4 all. Could you use a liberating structure, whether it's that one or something else, to encourage input from everybody without just doing what I certainly have to do in this situation, which is say, does anyone have any questions? Or, you know, open questions to a big group aren't always going to be productive. So can you put in some sort of structure that will help people input and make them feel more comfortable doing so?
I think just to add onto that, a good way is to like break the longer activities into smaller pieces as well. So just really short, snappy activities. So it's quite easy to keep focus for that small activity.
Yeah, absolutely. One more from the chat. We've been experimenting through trial and error with how long people can focus in meetings and building in breaks. Any rules of thumb? Any meeting that is more than an hour to an hour and a half is something I would avoid in general. In terms of how often I would plan breaks for a remote session, probably every half an hour to 45 minutes at most. Try and keep people engaged and try and keep it short. The Pomodoro technique is great for sort of developers. So if they're, you know, taking a 25-minute block to plan what they're going to get done in that time and then take 5 minutes, could you use something like that for your meetings? So can you agree that in the next 20 to 25 minutes you're going to get a certain thing done? Then you'll take 5 minutes, then you'll look again. If you've got a really long session, something like that could be useful. But yeah, no more than 30 to 45 minutes without a break, and try and keep all meetings less than sort of 90 minutes if you can. The other thing we're concerned with is that not everyone has a great home setup. Are you aware of any companies who have a policy on what they'll buy on their employees' behalf? Most companies have a policy. It obviously varies wildly by company and company, you know, finances and status and stuff. I think there are certain things that an individual can expect of a company in terms of health and safety wise, but that's a conversation to be had with people at your company. I don't think there's a sort of flat standard anywhere, I'm afraid. Any more questions from anyone?
We do also have and a open library of assets that we will send you a link to as part of the following up from this on Tuesday, so that you can see any of the materials that we've been currently using and we're applying at and. So that will be part of your follow up as well.
Yep, thanks for that, Jess. All right, it doesn't look like there's any more questions, so I'm going to give it another 10 seconds or so and then we'll wrap up. One more, starting to do virtual workshops. I use Insights Discovery, not sure what that is. What's the best Zoom package to buy? So there are various levels. I think go onto their site and take a look at what each level offers. I have my own personal account outside of work for social things because it was something I was using a lot right now. So I have a personal one at the lowest level, but company-wide, we've obviously got a more corporate level of that. But yeah, go and take a look at the packages and see which one works for you, and yeah, give it a go. All right, I think that's everything. Thank you for your time, everyone. Have a lovely long weekend, and thanks for coming. Cheers.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.